Hi, Reverend Paula Zabkar here from Spiritual Soul Center on another Sunday with you, or whatever day you're watching this message. Thank you so much for tuning in and learning with me and growing with me and expanding with me. There's no greater thing to be doing, I think, in life, and that is to do this expansion together, to do this spiritual growth together. And today I want to talk about this idea of self-love. It takes a lot of courage to be true to who you are, to really be bold and courageous and brave enough to be who you are and to be who you are with humility. That's the key. Because if we're not that way, we can be really just so self-righteous and repugnantly self-righteous, really. We can make ourselves self-important by saying, well, I am boldly who I am meant to be. But we've got to have that humility piece. And I've talked about that before. To be bold and to be wrapped in humility at the same time. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And we have to know who we are in order to do that. We have to know ourselves. We have to know what is important to us and how we want to be in the world in order to show up with that bold humility, to have that confidence of showing up that way. It's the only way to be authentic and honest with ourselves, to show up that way. So when you are brave enough to show up that way, you know in situations how to make decisions. You know when yes is the right decision, you know when no is the right decision, and you know when I think I need to think about that for a while is the right decision. And you feel comfortable with any of those. And when we get in that habit of doing that and are courageous and brave enough to live that way, then we can accept that in others as well. We can accept the yeses and the nos and the let me think about it's from other people because we know how important that is to our way of being, to showing up authentically who we are. So it all sounds great, doesn't it? Just be courageous, go out there, stand up for yourself, be courageous and be who you are. But it's not always that easy, is it? How do we really do that? How do we find it in ourselves to be that way in life? Well, you see, I don't think it really starts with courage. It doesn't really start with courage. I think the place that it starts in us is with self-love. I think it starts with self-love. We really need to start from the inside with that place of accepting ourselves the way we are. That's what it's about. And when we love ourselves enough, when we provide that place in us to be that way, then we find that we can accept others the same way. It's the old maxim, it's the thing that Jesus said and many traditions have said, that first you've got to love yourself. You've got to know what that feels like and know how important it is in order to be that for other people. So that's where it starts. This courage to be who you are and for me to be who I am starts with self-love. And self-love starts with the release of judgment. You know, all spiritual work, I believe, is about release. It's about releasing things and making room. We say at Spiritual Soul Center and in many other traditions as well, that we are love, that we come from love, that love is what we are, and so love is what we see. And if we know that, then anything less than self-love, we've just really lost touch with what and who we really are. That's it. We've lost touch with that. We've let something cloud over that. We haven't had enough space in ourselves to let that pour forth from us. So what does it look like to love yourself? What does it look like? Well, I didn't read these things in a book. This is what I've been thinking about this week and journaling about this week and thinking of how it's worked in my life. And so I want to give you a few ideas of what it means to love yourself. And the first one is simply this: to admit that you have imperfections, to admit that you have limitations. You know, there might be a school of thinking that says, well, you can do anything. Well, yes, you can, and there are limitations in our humanness. There are imperfections in our humanness, and I think what covers up self-love in us is our own expectation that we be perfect, that we go around pretending that we're fine. I'd like you to think, for instance, of someone right now in your life who you think is rolling on all cylinders, has it made, has the perfect life. I want you to think of that person right now. And I want you to know, and I will guarantee you, that that life, as you see it, the perfection that you see in that life, in that outward life, is not perfect. There are obstacles, there are imperfections, there are limitations, and that's okay. We simply need to accept them. We need to say, that's okay, this is where I am, and accept those limitations. There's some freedom in that. Can you feel the lifting of the ease of that? Here's another one that I think is so important, and that is humor. Our ability to laugh at ourselves when we find ourselves in that place of having made a mistake or having stumbled in some way. To be able to laugh at our stumbles. I mean, come on, folks. To try to pretend that we don't stumble is crazy. You know, we're much better off to release that through humor, through laughter, to release our stumbles, to laugh at our stumbles, rather than to try to defend the indefensible about something we did. Laugh at ourselves. Humor. Humor is a form of self-love. Here's another thing. Not being afraid to change our mind when we come with new information. You know, this is a huge one. We have beliefs maybe that are very well grounded, but when we come across new information, we should consider that. We should consider that rather than holding tightly onto something. We should consider that there might be an opportunity to evolve, to change something, to not be so attached to something in my mind that I can't release it. When I was thinking about this, it reminded me of a book I read by Eli Saslow called Rising Out of Hatred. It's called The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist. And it's the story of a young man who was really indoctrinated by his family into white nationalism. And as he went off to college and he decided to go to a liberal arts school, he was invited in by some of his classmates, and he was exposed to a whole new way of thinking that he had never been exposed to before. And he changed his mind. He wasn't so stuck in the old way of being that he didn't change his mind. And I think that, and I know from reading the book, that it gave him this great freedom. This great freedom, what a great gift we give to ourselves, what self-love we give to ourselves by allowing ourselves to change our mind, to evolve. It's all about release. You're noticing that, isn't it? These last two things are about release as well. And that is simply this, to apologize when we've done something wrong. To simply say, I'm sorry. Remember that quote from Mark Nepo's Book of Awakening that says, you know, when you spill the soup, just say, I'm sorry I spilled the soup. Don't blame it on the world tilting off its axis at that particular time. You know, just say you're sorry. A long time ago, probably approaching 20 years, I was in a construction trailer with a construction team. We were building an elementary school. And I don't remember any of the details about this. I'll tell you what I remember is the feeling that I had. The feeling that I had. And we were in this meeting, and for whatever reason, I either accused this person of something they didn't do, or used a curse word at them, or really got angry with them and yelled at them. And I left that construction trailer. I was still had myself in a all bound up. And I went home. I was working from my home office. And I started thinking about that. I started feeling really bad for what I had done. And I just couldn't shake it. The next day, I felt so bad about it. And I thought to myself, you know, you really need to call and say you're sorry. You really just need to call and apologize and free yourself and let this person know that you were wrong for being that way. And that's what I did. And he listened to me. I'm so grateful that he did. He listened to what I had to say. And I know from what he said that he appreciated my apology. It did more for me in that moment. It released me. It gave me freedom. It's a form of self-love in that regard. It's a form of self-love. The other thing that's very closely associated with apologizing is to forgive. Is to remember to forgive those who do something against us, who trespass against us. To lift that burden from us, to lift that burden from me. Because it's a heavy thing to carry around. It's a heavy thing to carry judgment about myself and about others around. To forgive myself for the things and the places I've fallen short. To forgive others for that same thing. You see, noticing this common ground is one of the things that allows us to love ourselves and to love the other. Because we see that we're so much the same. It's all about releasing. And it has a lot to do with not hiding who we are. To not hiding that, to not be afraid of being exactly who we are, because we don't have anything to hide. And when we don't have anything to hide, we're less likely to be hurt. We're less likely to be hurt. When we don't have anything to hide, we can feel more comfortable in our own skin. And doesn't that feel like self-love? To feel comfortable exactly in your own skin, exactly as you are, exactly in this moment, knowing all these things, knowing imperfections that I have, knowing that there's opportunities for me to forgive and apologize, knowing that humor is a way of releasing it, knowing that I can change my mind. Isn't that freedom and isn't that self-love? I think it is. I think it is. And that courage to release, that courage to stand up for who as you are, who you are, with humility, doesn't come from forceful will. It comes from this inspiring self-love. That's what I believe. That's the conclusion that I've come to. You know, there's a quote that we might have heard before. I want to read the longer version from Leo Tolstoy, and it goes like this. There can be only one permanent revolution, a moral one, the regeneration of the inner man. How is this revolution to take place? Nobody knows how it will take place in humanity, but every man and woman feels it clearly in themselves. And yet, in our world, everybody thinks of changing humanity, while nobody thinks of changing themselves. And this is what I'm talking about here. This is how we change the world. Don't sell yourself short, and we shouldn't sell ourselves short. The way we change the world is to take that revolution right here, is to know that the only revolution is the revolution of my consciousness, of lifting it up to a different level, of loving myself first so that I can see and recognize the common humanity and love others in the same way. In the midst of all of our shortfalls, in the midst of all of our having to apologize and forgive, in the midst of that dance, to do that, to love ourselves. So how does it look? How does it look to be courageously yourself, wrapped in humility, and having done some work with self-love? Well, I was listening to a story on the BBC News Channel about the COVID graveyard in Iraq. The local cemeteries in Iraq refuse to take anyone who's died of COVID. They have a concern of spreading the disease and infecting more and more people, and so they simply don't take the bodies. So there was a cemetery outside the city, out in the desert south of Baghdad, where they're carrying all of these all these people, the sons and daughters and mothers and husbands and fathers and children. Anyone who dies of COVID is carried out there. And there's a young taxi driver that they interviewed. And he's not driving taxi anymore. He's driving a van, and he's transporting people out to this cemetery in the desert. Some of his family are very proud of him for doing this. There's other people in his family who are scared and want him to stop because of the possibility of infection. And his response is, let me continue this work and thank God. Let me continue this work and thank God. What I think about that man, that young man, is that he has a form of self-love in him. He has this place in him where he's allowing love to rise up. Even in the face of potential sickness and illness, he realizes that's his to do, and so he is able to love others in that way. Well, when he gets out to the cemetery, There are not a lot of men who are digging the graves, and it just so happens the men who are used to be the armed forces against the Islamic State. So here they are, showing up to provide this great service to so many people who are dying of COVID in Iraq. They take the bodies, and as is Islamic and Muslim custom, they wash them, unafraid, knowing that what they provide is meaningful and provides dignity to the one who has died. They kneel and pray over the grave while the family waits off in the distance, and they provide that service to the same people they might have been fighting not long ago. And I have to think that these men have released enough inside themselves to allow the love that they are to rise up in them, and to serve in this way, and to serve with no malice, to serve only with love and concern and dignity for the families and the dead as well. I think that's what self-love does. Self-love first heals us, and then it can heal the world. I think that's what Tolstoy was talking about. First, love comes up in us because it's what we are. It's how we are. It is our original foundation. And then it heals others as well. And I think of those men today, out in the middle of the desert, digging those graves, washing those bodies, and praying for people they don't know. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of graves. I'm so grateful that they're there. And I'm quite sure many Iraqi people are grateful for the service that they perform. So to circle back around, what is this idea of self-love? What are the ways that we can implement it in our own life? They're very simple, and yet we may struggle with some of them. But that's okay, because the first one is just to admit that we have limitations. Admit that we're not always right. Admit that we sometimes struggle. And that's okay. That's okay, because you know what? It's true for all of us. And that common connection is so critical to loving ourselves and loving others as well. And don't forget to laugh. Don't forget that humor is a part of self-love. To be able to laugh, to remember to change your mind when you have new information. It's okay to change your mind with new information. Feel the freedom that starts to come when we can incorporate these in our life. To apologize, to say I'm sorry, to feel it lift even further, to create more space. And to forgive. To forgive even what you thought was unforgivable, so that you can love yourself, so that you can feel that freedom and love others as well. And take a deep breath. That's always a good one for me. Let's do that now as we just sit for a little while together and feel what it feels like to be totally accepting of ourselves exactly the way we are in this moment, in this very moment, right here and right now. It is with a grateful heart, a peaceful mind, this now moment together, to feel the ease that we can exist in when we release that which blocks the love that we are. The feeling of grace, the feeling of love, the feeling of possibility, the feeling of freedom right in this moment. For that and so much more, even in this world of chaos and confusion, in this world right now we can say that we are grateful, and so it is. Amen. Well, let's close like we often do in this way. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be peaceful and at ease. May all be happy. And so it is. Amen.